Are officials judging you in ways other than against the rulebook? Let's get into it. Officials are in motorsports for the same reason as you are. They love racing. Now, officials have a very unique view of racers and the decisions that they're making. Whereas parents and coaches and other drivers are kind of looking for specific things against the lens of improvement, officials are looking at it in a completely different light. Not only do they have a physical position on the racetrack that is way closer than parents are ever going to get, but they also have a unique position of seeing drivers making decisions on a regular basis under pressure. How is it any different than what parents and coaches are doing? Drivers and coaches are usually looking at drivers, judging them based on, did they gain positions on the start? Did they lose? Did they make mistakes in certain corners? How's their lap time versus the other drivers? But when their driver gets a penalty, they see it as something being done to the driver rather than something the driver has done themselves. There's an emotional reaction to it rather than an objective one. One of the really important and probably the most overlooked driver development tool that exists that nobody really seems to be paying attention to is, are you getting starts waved off? Are you getting start penalties? Are you getting penalties for contact or nose cone violations? What are the things that officials are calling you on? Once you start to understand the patterns there, then you've got to ask the question of why is the driver making those decisions? When a coach or a parent watches a driver come up to a start, they're looking to see how they end up in the first corner, after the first lap. They're seeing how their driver really got through the start. For an official, we're looking at the decisions that driver is making under pressure up against the rule book. Now, if you've been watching my videos, you can see in the starts, I am standing right next to the racetrack. And in many cases, the drivers are looking right at me. I can see their feet, I can see their body language, I can see what they're doing better than anybody else on the racetrack can, including their competitors. And what I get to see is the difference between a driver who is nervous, a driver who is confident, a driver who feels out of their depth, a driver who is feeling the pressure too much. These are the kinds of things you can see when you're actually looking the drivers in the eye. A good, for instance, is a driver on pole coming up to a start and getting their starts waved off. A parent or coach might be noticing that they're going too fast and tell them the mechanics of having to slow down. Whereas I'm in a position where I can see if that driver is scared. I can see if that driver is paying more attention to off pole than they are pole. In fact, watching the driver off pole, I can see how they're making their decision making. Are they watching the driver's foot? Are they watching the driver's body language? Watching for what the pole sitter is doing in their peripheral vision while they look straight ahead. All of these types of decision making determine how that driver's start is going to be. Further back in the pack, drivers who are kind of desperate to try and hold on to position versus a driver who's willing to give up a little bit going through that first corner just for the idea of getting through that first corner. I can see that. I can see the drivers making the decisions where they're completely overwhelmed with what's happening or so dead focused on a particular thing that they drive over the lane, or they're pushing too hard, or they've burned up their clutch and they're not even hearing their own engine. You can see all of that from that perspective, and you can start getting a judgment for how those drivers are going to do for the rest of the race. If you're getting contact penalties, why are you getting contact penalties? Why do you feel that you need to make contact to make those passes? Maybe it's a racing room penalty where you keep driving people off the track. That would tell me that you're probably not confident in your ability to make that pass stick or to do an over-under in the next corner, depending on the way the racetrack goes. Or maybe it's simply because you're not as confident on the brakes going in the corner. Again, squeaky wheel. We have no choice but to pay more attention to drivers who are causing problems than drivers who don't. And of course, coming off the racetrack, the drivers that just refuse to put their hands up and drive over lines and do stupid things and get stupid fines. Why are they doing that? Often that's a driver that is insecure. They're far more worried about what other people think of them than they are worried about actually accomplishing something on the racetrack. it's an ego issue. Those kinds of things are development issues that often coaches and parents completely ignore. That's just kids being kids. Except that it's not, because not all the kids do that. Now, there are drivers who get penalties who also win races, but they get a lot of penalties. They cost themselves time and trouble. They cost themselves positions on the racetrack because of the decisions they make. Timing scoring and the steward get used to hearing certain names on a regular basis connected to certain penalties. That's an indicator of something going on with that driver, something that the driver has to develop, or a bad habit they've developed that they need to shake. As the official on the racetrack and the marshals, we're seeing the drivers, often seeing their eyes as they're making decisions. You can see the difference between panic in a driver's eyes and confidence. You can see a driver who's focused on a start on off pole when they're on pole and should be in control, versus another driver who is focused ahead, has already made up a plan for that start, and knows what they're gonna do. Does this mean that officials are using the rulebook or not using the rulebook depending on how they're judging drivers on the racetrack? No, not really. I mean, you're always going to have biased people in any sort of sport. That is the exception. That's not the rule. Being a fan of racing, I may not have favorite drivers on the racetrack, but I do like to see development. One of my favorite things in the world, and it's kind of rare, but it does happen, watching a driver who has earned themselves a lot of penalties and had a really bad reputation work their way out of it because they realized what decisions they were making were not helping them. Which leads to the big question. If officials have this unique perspective and judgments on how drivers are doing and developing, how can a driver take advantage of that? Now, officials are not coaches. They're not there for your driver's development. But what you can do is pay attention to the things that you're doing on the racetrack and the things that are getting officials' attention. And at the appropriate time, ask the official what they think you're doing wrong and how you can do better. If you're getting starts waved off because you're going too quickly, why are you going too quickly? If you're getting lots of contact penalties, why are you getting contact penalties? Now, it's not to say that all these things are easy for officials to see, and it's not that an official is going to openly answer those questions for you, but at least if you take the time to speak to an official who is a race fan, who has a unique perspective on you as a driver, who is making judgments based on the decisions that you make on that racetrack, you might find that you get a bit of an insight into something that you're doing as a driver that can completely change the way that you race. And in the end, make you better. Remember, we're not coaches, but it doesn't mean that we don't have insights that will help you. Ask us. We're here. Just be polite about it. So what do you think? Are officials a potential opportunity to get some information? Should officials never say anything about a driver and simply be black and white answers as to what they're doing on the track based on the rules? I'd be interested to hear your opinion on that, especially if you're an official. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those wonderful things. And as always, I will see you at the racetrack.